Do you ever wonder, what in the world was it thinking when you hear about a ghost haunting someone? Well, now you can find out. In Ghost Stories The Flip Side, Fiona Fabblestabble, ghost and ghost representative, tells the ghost stories from the side of the ghosts. So sit back and get ready for the real story. The Flip Side.
Hi, Fiona Fabblestabble here, ghost and ghost rep. I have another story for you today. This story is called Don't Stop There, and it takes place in the state of Delaware. It's brought to me through the ghost grapevine by Mrs. Spoon, who isn't really the main ghost in this story, but she is a ghost who was there, and she felt the world needed an explanation. So here goes, Don't Stop There! Carla and her father were driving from their home in Atlanta to her grandparents' house in Boston for the holidays and taking Fluffy along. Fluffy was a beautiful gray, long-haired cat with big green eyes who they had adopted from a shelter when she was just a year old. Fluffy acted very strange sometimes, even for a cat, but they loved her anyway. As they drove along, they passed a welcome sign that read, Delaware, the first state. Dad, why is Delaware called the first state? Carla asked. Was it really the first state? Her dad replied, It was the first state to ratify the U.S. Constitution, that is, to make it official, so it earned the nickname the first state. They continued driving, drove a little further when he said, Oh, there's a motel I booked for tonight. I'll check us in. You and Fluffy can wait in the car where I can see you with doors locked. It'll only take a few minutes. He went to the front desk to check in. The motel clerk had a slightly guilty look on his face when he said, Sorry, mister. We're full up. But I had a reservation, Mr. Johnson said. Well, when you didn't get here by 9 p.m., we gave your room away. There's a conference in town. Everything's full. I don't know what to tell you. Listen, I can't drive anymore, and we need a place to sleep. I booked a room, and I want my room, Mr. Johnson said. The clerk looked unhappy, but said, Well, I do have one room, but the boss doesn't like for us to rent that one out. I don't think I should. Hasn't been rented in many, many years. What I've heard is it has a reputation for being haunted. Some of the old-timers around here swear that people used to disappear from it. Mr. Johnson shook his head. I don't believe in that nonsense. We just need a place for tonight. I really can't drive anymore. I'm falling asleep at the wheel. Motel clerk said, Yeah, I can't say that I especially believe in that spooky stuff either. Who you got with you? My daughter. The clerk looked out the window into the car. Is that a cat I see in your car? We don't allow animals here, mister. Please, my daughter needs that cat with her. She suffered the loss of her mom last year, and the cat helps her sleep at night. I'll pay extra. Well, the desk clerk's eyes lit up at that. Okay, you can stay. $100 more for the cat. And no messes. They keep that room up for the inspections, so even though it hasn't been used in years, it's clean and everything works. The clerk gave Mr. Johnson the keys to the room, and he, Carla, and Fluffy all went in. It was more of a suite than a room, with 2 bedrooms and a sitting area. Carla wondered why in the world they would leave this room unrented. Carla fed Fluffy and set up her litter box, then took her into one of the bedrooms. Fluffy stretched and jumped up onto the bed. Good night, Dad, Carla called from her room as she changed into her pajamas. Good night, I'm turning in too, her dad said as he went into his room. Carla and her dad both fell asleep quickly. It had been a long day of driving. Carla slept very soundly until she heard some little noises that woke her up. They seemed to be coming from the far side of the room. She hadn't noticed it before, but there was a painting above a small table on the far wall. It was glowing in the moonlight, and she swore she could hear noises coming from it. The painting showed a landscape with a few people on a hill. Carla got out of bed and approached the painting. She leaned forward over the table to get a better look when something gray swooped down, grabbed hold of the front of her pajamas, and pulled her into the painting. It happened so fast she didn't even have time to scream. Fluffy flew off the bed, jumped up onto the table under the painting, and started scratching at it. The painting had a hard coating and her claws just scrabbled on it. They didn't seem sharp enough to penetrate it or even leave any scratches on it at all. Well, Carla found herself standing in the landscape inside of the painting. She took a few steps, but she didn't want to go too far in, even though she could see the people on the hill. They were dressed in various types of clothing like they'd lived in different times or something. One woman wore a long gown and looked like she was from the 1800s, as did a man who wore an old-fashioned suit and held a walking stick and a derby hat in his hand. A couple of other people on the hill wore casual clothes from more modern times. They were talking, and one of them said, "Hey, old Elias got another one." The woman in the gown approached Carla and said, "Hello, dear. Welcome to the painted prison." Carla asked faintly, "What does that mean?" She was starting to feel lightheaded. Just then, Carla noticed a nasty-looking man flying above their heads, laughing maniacally, an evil look on his face. He'd probably been quite handsome at one point, but now he was a hollow shell of himself. He was thin and bony, with gray skin, bulging eyes, wooden teeth, and scraggly gray hair. "Go away, Elias!" The woman screamed at him, but the man just swooped down and slapped her head before flying toward Carla. There was a wild scrabbling sound as Fluffy clawed furiously at the painting. Elias flew over to the front of the painting and started taunting Fluffy, pointing and laughing and making stupid faces. "Yo, I hate cats! Get away from here, you stupid good-for-nothing ball of fur!" he yelled at her as he flew around the painting, swooping and fluttering like a madman. Fluffy gave him a pointed look, the kind only a cat can do, then very purposefully sat down on the table and put her paw to her mouth. She then proceeded to chew and hone her right front claw into a fine, sharp point as she stared unblinkingly at Elias. The next time Elias flew toward her face, Fluffy lunged at him, snarling, her tail fluffed up, and punctured the painting with her sharpened claw. Her fur took on a purplish sheen as she tore a long line down the face of the painting. Elias screamed and fell back. Carla saw her chance and forced her way through the tear in the painting and back into the motel room. Elias was screaming and trying to put the tear back together with his hands as the other people in the painting followed Carla's lead, escaping. But as soon as they left the painting, they disappeared. Elias flew around and around in circles, trying to patch the holes as Fluffy tore the painting to shreds with her claws. By the time she got done with it, there wasn't much left, just a pile of small scraps on the floor, and Elias was gone. Carla's dad heard the commotion and came rushing in, but when Carla told him what had happened, he didn't quite believe it. He just shook his head and told them to go back to bed. Carla and Fluffy huddled up together on the bed, keeping an eye on the pile of painting scraps on the floor, worried they might try to magically get back together. They didn't sleep a wink. Luckily, the scraps didn't do anything, and the next morning they hit the road again, Dad driving while Carla and Fluffy slept all the way to Boston. Rip it up! I have the ghost of Mrs. Spoon here. She's one of the people who was in the painting, the one who spoke to Carla. She's going to tell you what really happened. Well, thank you, Fiona. Where to start? First, I want your viewers and listeners to know that, although Elias and the rest of us in the painting were ghosts, not all ghosts are like Elias. Most of us are nice. I want to explain what happened, too. Elias was an evil genius who unfortunately had no friends, handsome as he was. He thought he could trap people in a painting and force them to be his friends. But we all know that doesn't work. You have to be nice to have friends, and he really wasn't nice. Regardless, he created the painting, enchanting it with magic, with each brushstroke. But shortly after he finished the painting, he was hauled off to prison for various crimes. The harsh prison life turned him into the hideous-looking creature he became as a ghost. This happened many, many, many years ago. But he had infused enough evil magic into the painting that when Elias passed, his ghost was able to inhabit it and capture people. I myself was captured long ago, and many others after me. We soon became ghosts once inside the painting, as it couldn't sustain life. But we found that our ghosts remained trapped as well. Many of the other trapped ghosts were behind the hills when Carla came along, so she never saw them. There were a lot of us here. The painting traveled far, being sold many times over. The other people trapped with me were from many different time periods and places. Elias was a very powerful man, and it seemed no one could overcome his wickedness. Unfortunately, we all came to know him well in our time trapped in the painting with me. He treated us horridly. He would make us do very unpleasant things that we hated and say terrible things to us. Eventually, he'd get bored with his current prisoners and look for new people to trap and torment. He was always at it. Many of our friends and relatives, priests, others tried to free us from the painting over the years, but to no avail. Horace the Brute even tried to rip the painting apart, but no one and nothing was strong enough until Fluffy did. Regardless, the painting finally made its way to the motel. Elias was delighted. There were lots of people to capture to be his so-called friends, at least until the owner stopped running that room. That made him mad. He was thrilled when he saw Carla after years of no new people. Too bad for him he didn't count on Fluffy. I think Fluffy is more than what she seems, it would appear. We all are quite grateful to Fluffy. Now our ghosts are free. Some have passed through already to the next place while some stayed here. We don't know how that works and who gets stuck here while others get to go through. But it does seem as though Elias has passed on to somewhere else. Thank goodness. I can't imagine it's the good place. So my advice to the living? To have friends, be nice and be a good friend. And treasure your life as long as you have it. And also treasure your pets. Well, thank you, Mrs. Spoon. Oh, Julie is here. She would like a word. She's a ghost and she's a cat communicator. She says Fluffy has something she wants told. And here it is. They may call me Fluffy, but my real name is Lady Artemis Sharpclaws. Well, thank you, Julie, and thank you, Mrs. Spoon. I'm Fiona Fabblestabble. This is Ghost Stories The Flip Side. We'll see you next time.
This has been Ghost Stories The Flip Side. The ghosts thank you for listening and wish you a long and happy life.